welcome everyone for another talk of the day. I know that you are still thirsty for more information regarding grammar. So last time we tackled a lot of the different things that we need to learn about grammar. And one of it are its basic structures and all of it. But right now, we are going to much deeper regarding grammar in relation to second language acquisition process. But before anything else, I just want you to reflect about something or think about how did you learn English? Did you acquire it naturally? Or are you proficient with it naturally? Or is it the other way around? So that's some of the key points that will lead you to understand more regarding the process of learning grammar or learning a second language. So, with this, I just also want to point out some of the important concepts that can be comprehended regarding this topic, which are the following, such as the first language or our L1 and the second language or the LP. So, the first language is something that we acquire naturally. On the other hand, second language is something that we acquire through learning. So, having this in mind, let us now go directly towards our topic. And this, through this, we are going to discuss the model for second language learning and its use. There are actually five stages that can be seen in this process, such as the input, intake, acquisition, access, and output. And all of this can be happened chronologically and not the other way around. Okay, so that's it. So, I think that this can be overwhelming, but let's make it comprehensive through this discussion. So, are you okay? So, are you ready? Please listen thoroughly to this discussion so you can effectively learn and understand this concept. So let's now move on to our first stage, which is the input. So in here, input can be also called as the pre-production stage. Actually, guys, in during this stage, during this first stage of our learning process towards our desired second language, and particularly in the context of the Philippines, this can be through English. So in here, the input, it was said that basically most of the learners here are like babies. Why babies? Since the learners at this point of stage may tend to utter only one word or two-word phrases. So basically, in input, this is used to initiate the language learning process. Basically, the starting point of all of this process. And in here, there are approaches that we need to follow, or there are approaches that instructors, or basically the teachers, follow in order to attain the learning capacity in terms of second language. For instance, we have the simplification of input. In this approach, there are basically textbooks and teachers' discourse are used um, to acquire knowledge or to learn basically the structure, the rules about grammar. So the next we have is frequency of exposure. So um, in here, some of the structures or rules in grammar were repeatedly or were repeatedly seen in some of the source texts, or basically there are certain patterns that can guide the learners to learn the grammar of a certain second language. Next, we have explicit instruction and implicit instruction here. So basically, it was said that these two modalities or these two types of approaches are basically the main type of approaches that can be used in regarding to teaching grammar. So the explicit instruction is something that is formally presented, in which it is tend to um, teachers tend to give us the the rules first, or how grammar is being used and its structures before bombarding students with worksheets to to be answered. And while on the other hand, implicit instruction is something that teachers may tend to give communication-based activities. Basically, communication-based activities may be in the form of watching movies that deals with the second language of a learner. For instance, in the English context, in order for a learner to learn English, they may tend to watch Disney movies, Hollywood films, or even in some YouTube videos, which are popular right now, such as Peppa Pig. As we can see, most of the younger ones tend to learn English and have acquired perfect accent through just by watching it. And some of the researchers or scholars regarding second language acquisition also says that implicit instruction is something similar through how we learn our first language, since we are being exposed with some of the given um, experiences that involves this second language, then we tend to learn it naturally or acquire it naturally. So, the last, we also have here consciousness raising, which makes learners aware of linguistic features. Or in this part, the learners were aware of what are the basic structures or basic figures of speech and so on. So, did you learn about input? Or did you get it? If you do so, let me just sum all of it. Input, once again, is the first process of this stage, and input may pertain to a data. So let us think of input as simply the dissemination of the required data in this process. Data can be in a form of the grammar structures or the rules and anything, any means in order for you to learn about a certain topic regarding grammar. So now, let's move on to our next stage. If we have grammar, we are now having an intake or simply an understanding of what those data or those structures of grammar pertains. Oh, so in this stage, it is also referred as early production, and it defines as something like a subset of an input. Okay, so there are actually factors that may affect how a learner can understand the input or a learner's intake. First, we have is complexity. In here, it is dealt with um, appropriate level of difficulty regarding the grammar items in the source text or basically in the lesson. What do we mean by this? Um, there if there are actually some levels of difficulty, for instance, easy level, average level, or the difficult level, which should be inclined through the understanding of the learner. For instance, in um, some of the items may tend to be easy. So this may pertain that some learners will disregard this due to being easy, or which can lead to um, the learners to find it boring. So, if it's too difficult, the learners may tend to be discouraged to learn about that certain item. Next, we also have here is the saliency, which are items that must be noticed or attended. So, our, this saliency may also affect the intake of a learner, since if there is a low saliency or low highlighting of this concept, definitely the learner will not understand or master that certain topic in grammar. Next, we have frequency. Those grammar items or those structures in grammar should have a sufficient frequency, or there must be a repetitive patterns, or the learner should be a frequent dealt with those type of items that can help them in learning a certain grammar. So, if there is a sufficient frequency or supplemented items regarding those things in grammar, then definitely the student will definitely master the concept in grammar. So that's why it's considered as some factors that can affect in the understanding of a learner. Next we have is the need. A learner a learner may affect this a certain grammar item may affect a learner's understanding regarding this if um, a certain item can fulfill a communicative need. What do we mean by this? If this is something that can be used in the communication or in the discourse of a learner. So again, intake is something that interprets the input in the first stage. So are you okay with that? Did you understand? So, well, I hope so. Next, we have the third one, which is the acquisition. In here, acquisition is also known as speech emergence. In here, the learners tend to have a good comprehension about about the inputs or the data in the first stage. Since they already understand what the input means, definitely acquisition pertains to something that can start the learners to know how to speak or having this speech emergence. And in here, the learners tend to incorporate their new learning item into their developing system, or also known as their interlanguage system, which means that this interlanguage system is a mixture of their first language and their second language. And another a perfect example for this is Filish or Taglish in the Philippine context, in which the students tend to mix Filipino and English in their discourse. So it was also said that learning cannot mirror the image of teaching, in which the learners should not focus merely on what the teachers will um, teach them. Basically, there is a process that they can acquire through learning grammar. For instance, the first process is noticing. There is a necessity to recognize the difference between forms. As example, in the Filipino and English context. Um, when we pluralize a certain thing in Filipino, we use mga, the term mga. On the other hand, when we pluralize something in English context, we tend to use es and s. So, as you can see, that's one of the difference. And us Filipinos learning English can actually experience this. Next, discovering the rules. We now identify, there is an identification of grammatical variables. Next is accommodation and restructuring. There is immediate incorporation of intake. Next is experimentation. The learners here tends to hypothesize about the target language. So basically, in here, the acquisition, the learners tend to acquire some concepts or some items of grammar from his or her second language and incorporate it through his or her first language. So basically, that is what is meant by this third stage. So, now let's move on to the fourth stage. And in here, through the input, through understanding the input, and to acquiring to acquiring a certain structure in grammar or a certain comprehension or understanding, we are now language learners have the access. So what do we mean? Do we mean by access? In here, there's another term for access, which is intermediate fluency. Or this is the ability to use the interlanguage system, just like what we discussed earlier, during communication. Or since we are now knowledgeable enough regarding it, we tend to use it to communicate with others. And okay, there is now an application of what we have learned. So we use it in a conversation where we're trying to talk with or chat with our friends or basically tell a story and all. So, no. So, ganyan. Next, we have is the learners tend to acquire excellent comprehension. So basically, once they understand and acquire certain knowledge about the grammar, basically in this part, there is already fluency. But it was noted that during the access in this stage, um, learners may tend to make few grammatical errors and still learning in order to develop in order to develop a mastery in creating an output. So now let's move on to the final one, which is the output itself. Since after the previous steps, finally in here the learners can now definitely create or establish proficiency regarding um, those things that he or she have learned. So in here, output can be also referred to advanced fluency. And this is now the observed results of the learner's efforts. And through various practice, through rigorous practice in here, the the speech level of the learners are now near native. Oh, bongga, di ba? So in here, the input is now classified as sufficient and it can be once again attained through multiple practice. And in here, the learners are now an active user or producers of the language, in which it means that a learner can now produce an output through writing or through speaking fluently. So that's it. Now, very good. Now let's move on for our conclusion. In here, basically, we have five steps or five stages regarding this SLA or second language acquisition in the context of grammar. So the first one we have input, next the intake, next acquisition, access, then lastly output. So before anything else, I also want to end you and leave you with a quote. Learning is an active process. We learn by doing. Only knowledge that is used sticks in your mind. So that's that's it. Thank you so much everyone for listening, and I hope that you will be updated for our next topic. See you. Bye.